So bad news for me is good news for y'all. I ended up recording this and having my mic muted the entire time. So this is take numero dos. And unfortunately, that just means that I am a little bit further behind on creating content for y'all, but we'll still get to it. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Osprey E300, which is a very unique product in that it is not an ASIC, and it's an FPGA. However, it's an FPGA with custom firmware and a control board, and basically what is the husk of an ASIC unit. Now, we have seen ones like this in the past, like the M2, for example, the Black Miners, that sort of thing. The thing that sets this one a little bit apart, though, is it does use third-party mining software to basically mine with the hardware that is in it. This has both advantages and disadvantages, as you may expect, and we're going to go over that, the unit itself, its profitability, and some other options for mining with FPGAs right after a word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is myself. I recently launched a crypto mining e-course at sonofatech.com, and it includes 9 steps to cover when you decide to start your crypto mining journey. This is specifically pertaining to 2023 crypto mining profits and taking advantage of the down market to achieve skyrocketing growth as we move into the next halving of Bitcoin. You'll learn buying mining equipment in a bear market, using outside investment to speculative mine, begin mining once profit is established, sell mine crypto to pay for electricity, hold and prep for the bull run, sell at the top of the bull market, sell mining equipment at the top of the bull market, and begin investing in land and power so that you can bring in outside investors to utilize excess resources. Thanks everybody for your support, and I hope you enjoy the course. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section below. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. So, first things first, this unit is like a Lego set. You have 2 different options on the Osprey website. You can buy the E100 or the E300, which are both effectively the same from the perspective that it comes with the same case, it comes with the same control board, and everything is exactly the same fans as well, fan options of the Noctua or the server grade fans, except that you have 1 FPGA in the E100 and you have 3 FPGAs in the E300. Taking it apart, luckily, is pretty easy with instructions included with the purchase of one, meaning that if you purchase it, you'll know how to take it apart. You can take the fans off, and then you can take out all of the hash boards or add in new hash boards and plug those up to the control board or unplug them from the control board and use these separately. And then you're up and running with the amount of hash boards you want, presumably going from 1 to 2 and from 2 to 3. Now, the particular FPGA boards that are in here are the VU35Ps. So if you're looking for replacements, that's what you would be looking for. The only kind of thing that may be a problem finding is going to be specifically the heatsink utilized for these hash boards to fit within the unit itself, and you may have to go through Osprey to actually get that in particular, that heatsink that you'll need to keep the board cool. So that's kind of the breakdown of the hardware itself. Let's talk about power because it's interesting. This unit only utilizes 500 watts at the wall and a little bit less if you're on 220 and you're utilizing a platinum rated power supply. It could utilize a little more if you're overclocking or have higher overclocking capabilities as well. I mention this because you will have to basically supply your own power supply. And the power supply is going to basically have some requirements surrounding that. And that's going to be 7 PCIe power adapters, 6-pin. Now, that's because each hash board requires 2 and the control board requires 1. So while the power consumption is low, where if you saw the same power consumption on a GPU, you would be talking about 3 8-pins, somewhere around there, the requirement that comes off of the power supply is still going to be higher, meaning you are kind of having a huge requirement of the amount of cables that need to go to the unit itself. And so you can end up in a position where you're not actually optimizing the amount of power available on the power supply that you're utilizing with the unit and so on. That being said, keeping a power supply that's at about 50% load is always going to be the most efficient. So for example, what we utilized here was a 1200 watt HP server PSU, platinum rated, plugged through a parallel miner breakout board. And that allowed us to power up the unit. Now on initial power up, I did do a quick short video or Reels video on YouTube, just showing the out of the box efficiency, but the clocks were low. Now I did get an email later on from the Osprey team, and they went ahead and provided me with overclocks. And let's go ahead and talk about how you can apply them. There's a couple different ways, but first, before we get into that, I suppose I do want to go over the logs because it does take a little bit for this to pop up. You can see right now we're sitting at 14.33 gigahash a second reported by the miner, and the pool reporting 11.7 gigahash a second with an average of 13.43. Those numbers will be important, of course, later. That being said, there's a couple different ways that you can overclock. You do have voltage setting options on the main page. And then of course you have some temperature settings if you want to add any sort of shutdown operating temperatures. The other options for setting this is going to be under the mining, and you can actually set this within the config itself right here with the FPGA core clock, which is what I opted to do. And then you could still modify, the voltage settings if you like. Now they recommended that I do 610, 610, and 600, which did initially work, but because I had some medical issues and ended up keeping the miner a little bit longer, huge shout out to Osprey for working with me on that, the unit had some extra time to run. And during that extra time of running, it did get a little hot in the mining farm. And that resulted in actually one of the hash boards having some throttling. Now, it didn't look like thermal throttling. It looked like essentially not able to hit the clock at the default voltage settings. So what I did just to make sure everything was working and really staying within spec still is taking the core clock down to 600, 600, and 600, and it's been running reliably ever since. So I'm pretty happy with this particular setup. And there are a lot of different options here that you should keep in mind though. If you are a tinkerer, there's going to be the ability to get better efficiency out of these units than somebody that's not a tinkerer. You have a lot of overclocking and underclocking capabilities here, and that's nice to see within the firmware itself. So keep that in mind. This particular unit does have an interesting drop down for Allfather under the developer. Now, this is something that doesn't appear to be working at this time, but in the future could end up working. It's really going to be up in the air, and then I'll be curious what the developer fee is for that. The other note here is that currently utilizing Team Red Miner is going to only offer you 2 algorithms. Ethereum Classic, which we did not test because it didn't look like it was worth it at this time, and I have a little bit of time to really get with this particular FPGA unit. And then the Kaspa option, which is a 10% developer fee, which is quite high. And that's primarily due to the fact that you only have one developer option. So utilizing a third-party mining software does put it in this kind of weird boat where it still suffers the problem of all other FPGAs that you can currently purchase on the market, which is this high developer fee. In the future, of course, or even right now, there's potential for you to purchase an FPGA and then get a relationship with a bitstream developer and get different bit streams for different algorithms, or even for the same algorithms at a lower developer fee. But, you also don't have this sort of built-in support that is offered with the E300. Meaning because they do have their own firmware and their own control board here, updates and so on, and keeping these units relevant with new algorithms and such in the future is probably more guaranteed than purchasing an FPGA separate, where you will basically have to build out your own mining rig with it as well. Meaning instead of this all-in-one solution, like the Osprey E300, you're going to have a solution that you also need to purchase a Raspberry Pi for, a USB extender for the Raspberry Pi, and then of course still the power supply and all of that. That being said, there is a competitor right now that is available, or there is competition on the market basically at this point for FPGAs, as in the past there wasn't. And you can go to Coastal Crypto Mining. I'll leave a link to all of this down in the description below. And you can purchase the modified FK33, which does 2.4 gigahash a second at 70 watts. This means that basically to have the equivalent of an Osprey, you would need 6 of these, which is going to run you about $6,000 at the current rate. But here's where things get interesting. I do have an FK33 running. I'm closer to 60 watts, but that being said, if we use the worst case scenario at 70 watts and you do 6 times 70, you end up with 420 watts. As opposed to the 500 watts. So a modified FK33 is going to have a better power consumption, or a bunch of FK33s is going to have a better power consumption than a single Osprey, at least without some tinkering and that sort of thing. So that's something to keep in mind if you are going to make a purchase here. Now, some of the benefits as well is you have a lower barrier to entry on the FK33, presumably. I think that's why we saw the E100 option, of course, from Osprey come out to kind of compete here. So you're going to have basically some decisions to make when you're going in and making FPGA purchases. We also, as far as Kaspa, I would not bet the barn on Kaspa being profitable with FPGAs with the threat of ASICs around the corner. My assumption, though, with the rumors surrounding the Ice River and looking at Red Panda Mining potentially getting one, as well as the Kaspa Twitch channel getting one, is this. And that is that regardless of if the Ice River itself is real or not, the amount of hash rate that is on the network is probably the total amount of these ASICs that are currently in production for the time being. But once the Ice Rivers, if real, do launch, the problem that you're going to run into here is that those will be reverse engineered and there will be more manufacturers that come out with them. And then, of course, the difficulty on the network is going to skyrocket more and the FPGAs will no longer be viable on Kaspa. So if that's your only plan, this is probably not something you want to look at. But if your plan is to really utilize FPGAs for a lot of spec coin mining, getting into the Bitstream market, all of that, and of course the potential for updates to Team Red Miner, then okay, go for it. That's what you want to look at. Let's talk about profitability a little bit between these two as well. At 14.4 gigahash a second at 500 watts, with the 10% miner fee and a 13 cents a kilowatt hour, you're looking at $4.30 a day in profit, which really does put you at about 1,200 day ROI, provided the difficulty on the network of Kaspa does not change at any given time. And of course it is going to change. It is also dependent on the price of Kaspa, which has experienced a recent dump, presumably because everybody that was mining with these FK33s has now decided to dump not only the FK33s onto the consumer market, but also dump the coin onto the retail market. That's pretty much, I think, what we're seeing here. And best you can tell from looking at where these FPGA miners were mining to from the wallets and how those wallets moved. We can cover all that in another video. This is a review for the E300. Man, my tangents. I thought this video was going to be shorter because we were re-recording it. That being said, if we look at the FK33, we have 2.4 gigahash a second at 70 watts with a 10% miner fee at 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and that comes out to 76 cents a day. So at this current power cost and so on, this does end up being a 1,300 day ROI. So the E300 on Kaspa, with everything as it currently sits, is a better ROI time than the FK33s. That being said, though, here's where things get a little weird. Yes, the E300 would be dependent in its current form on the Osprey company of releasing new algorithms and so on and updating their firmware. However, you could still feasibly pull out those VU35Ps or still use the same enclosure and plug those up to something else. And in that case, there is the potential that you could just go with a Linux install and start running your own bit streams off of it. So tomato, tomato, really, at the end of the day. I would say that the FK33s have the longer setup. They have a better power consumption rate, meaning that over the longevity of the unit, you probably have some sort of power cost savings there, but you do have a lot of potential with the VU35Ps. Best bang for your buck, I think you can go with either or. That's kind of what I'm looking at between this. And don't forget to use SOT and all of those promo codes that will be linked down below for discounts on both of these units, because we do have discounts available for both of these units. Make sure you utilize those when you decide to purchase them. Overall, I think the Osprey unit is a very interesting item for the mining market. It does offer kind of this entry level kind of product for people into the FPGA market. The thing is because of the learning curve and so on that would come into play if support stops with Osprey, I would make sure that you are ready to make that commitment for a more difficult mining experience than your traditional load hive OS with GPUs or CPUs, or just plug in an ASIC and mine the same algorithm over and over again. FPGAs are a very unique market that require you to do a lot more digging, and I want to make sure that warning is clear. And you can't ever rely on a single coin with an FPGA, because the market will always be shifting and new coins will be more profitable, and the access to the mining software to make them more profitable is a lot more difficult at this time. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe, and notification bell down below. Don't forget the e-course at sonofatech.com. It helps me out and supports me directly, which is why I'm definitely appreciating every single one of you that's purchasing that. It's a lot better of an income than worrying about YouTube ad revenue or, of course, all of the affiliate ad revenue. If you guys want a video on that, I'll cover it on my Blind Run channel, but there's a ton of different revenue streams, and it's very important to go over them at some point. Another revenue stream is sonofatech.locals.com, where you can track my daily moves and premium posts from other users that will give you a little bit of an upper hand within mining. I'll see you next Tuesday.